So here we are at Capel Military Show. Just got in. It's currently 12 minutes past 9. Only arrived on site about 20 minutes ago, but parking was a bit of a nightmare. Anyway, here we are in the entrance. Got living history over here, down in the foxholes. There's some vehicles as we come in. Just waiting for my mate Jim, Fat Cockney, to grace us with his presence. So here we go. Looks like it's going to be a good day. They threatened rain. Last year it absolutely pelted it down. So I came last year with my dad, rest his soul, and got absolutely flooded out, and that was on the Friday. So it's unusually nice and dry for a Saturday. So here we go. I'll try and get some more footage later on of the living sites, but I'm only here till 12 as I need to go and visit my mate Alan later on. So catch you later. So here we have some of the Russian small arms. So what guns have we got in our rack today?
So, starting from this end, we've got the PPSH-41. There's a slightly better example here. So, PPSH-41 infantry submachine gun.
Okay. And what calibre would that have taken?
So that would have been 9x19, so 9mm, a pistol calibre.
Yeah.
And the drum magazines, like on this one, would have had 71 rounds, and the rate of fire on them was so immense that these 71 rounds would be gone in 5 seconds of pulling the trigger. So
okay.
They had a rapid rate of fire, used mainly for street fighting in combat such as Stalingrad, Berlin,
yep.
Areas like that. So
how accurate were these guns, or was it a case of spray and pray?
It could be definitely at the, so on here there's the two range sights. There's 100 and 200 metres.
Okay.
You can swap between them. Anything more than that, you're not going to be very accurate.
No, so at that distance it would be more for suppression rather than accuracy. But
and you'd probably want a couple just to...
yeah, but I suppose in Stalingrad, you know, it's very much house-to-house, or building-to-building fighting,
exactly, yes.
Driving the enemy back, not not long distance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we've got these. What are these rifles? Are these the Mosin Nagants?
So this example here is the Mosin Nagant, the standard infantry rifle used by the Soviet Union throughout the entire of the Second World War. Very simple mechanisms, actually designed in 1891 by the Russian Empire, and still sees service to today. So would that have been used in the First World War as well, if it was 1891? Yeah, used by the Russian Empire in the First World War as well. A standard sort of stripper clip action where you've got your rounds in clips here, open the bolt, slide them in, forward and down, and then you're ready to go. So the standard issue, sniper variants, were they the same or just... you can get sniper variants. It's been a while since I've seen any, and I can't remember if you can use the clips with them. Okay. I think they might be single load only. Yeah. Because the scope might get in the way of the action. And obviously the Mosin had the renowned off-centre scope, as seen in films like Enemy at the Gate, etc. Of course, yes. And just to the left of it is its slightly more attractive cousin, the SVT-40. This was, as the name suggests, started production in 1940, and just before the Germans invaded the Soviet Union. And when the invasion happened, the factories producing this weapon mainly swapped back to the Mosin Nagant. Okay, and why was that? This was such a complicated weapon to produce, and they needed as many as they could at the time. So for mass production? Yes. So because this rifle is also a semi-automatic instead of the bolt action of the Mosin Nagant, it's got a larger magazine. It's basically better in every way, but you can't make as many of them, more complicated. So might as well produce 5 Mosin Nagants for one of these. That's it. And what are these stories you hear about, when the Russians were fighting, one person would have a gun and someone else would have the bullets. Is that true, or is that propaganda? Very true in most cases. I think there are some stories of units at Stalingrad, like where Enemy of the Gates is based, being sort of very undersupplied and having to possibly do the actions that you say, where one group has a rifle and then when one goes down you scavenge from them, but it really was not commonplace like is implied.
No, so the Russians were actually well armed and maintained unit.
Mean, some of their supply lines were the strongest of the war, because obviously the Germans had to deal with all the sabotage from their occupied nations. The Allied nations had to cross entire oceans with their supplies, but for the Soviets it was just their front door. They could use their existing rail networks and roads and all that to get the supplies to the front line.
And how did the Russians react after Operation Barbarossa in 41, where they obviously started fighting with the Germans and Hitler, and then after the invasion?
Surprising to Stalin himself, who was adamant that Germany would not betray him, and their pact was, iron, it would not break.
Yeah.
But it is thought nowadays that some of the top generals in the Soviet General Staff did have their suspicions and did possibly even try to warn Stalin before the invasion. But obviously, as we know,
he was a modern day Hamlet. In the end, didn't trust the people around him, and unfortunately, not mentioning names, Kim Jong-un, similar things are happening today.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and then if we just pan over to the side, so what guns have you got here? Is this would this be a captured MP40?
MP40, 9mm. They're just portraying a partisan.
Okay.
Early to mid.
Excellent. And again, with your Mosin Nagant. So how did the Russians find the Mosin Nagant in comparison to things like, not that they would have shot them, but things like the Lee Enfield?
Well,
was the bolt as nice? Obviously the Lee Enfield's known for having it turned down so eye off the sight, or lack of having to take your eye off your sight, but...
Definitely, it's a difficult one to answer.
Okay,
sorry.
If you could have one gun, would it be, obviously as a Britishman portraying a Russian, would you rather have had the Mosin Nagant or a SMLE?
I think I would have had the Mosin Nagant, honestly, because it seems like a very reliable weapon to me. I've not shot this one live, but I shoot blanks out of it when we're doing our battle reenactments.
Yep.
Never had any problems. It works like a treat every time. So it just seems like a very reliable weapon that I could count on at the time. So.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so here we are back again with the Soviet Front Living History Group, and here we have a gentleman in reenactment gear. So we're asking some questions shortly and just getting to talk through who he is and what he's representing. Okay, so can you tell me a bit about what you're representing today and what equipment you might have with you?
We're doing Red Army Cavalry. You can tell that by the blue shoulder bolts.
So you're cavalry?
We're cavalry, yeah.
Okay.
I'm a particular Cossack.
Cossack.
Traditional Cossack coat, belongs to the clan. So you can tell by the colours of the hats and sleeves.
So tell me about the Cossacks. Who were the Cossacks? Because we hear about them and all we think about is funny beards, drinking vodka and doing funny dances.
Pretty much. It's a sub which is very underrated them. They are a subculture within Russia, within Ukraine, so Caucasus regions. They're mostly around the rivers, Don, Terek and Kuban. There's some in Siberia as well.
Okay. So would you say they were the native tribes of Russia, the old tribes?
Yeah, the old tribes.
Going
nomads,
back to the Tsars and... Okay. So what are these things on your chest?
So I can never remember the correct name nor pronounce it, but they're basically, originally, they would be the musket cartridges for a muzzle-loaded musket.
Okay.
Once the war, once British soldiers come in, you don't need them anymore. But it was such a symbol of the uniform within the Russian army, the Russian Imperial Army, that they kept them on the Cossack uniforms.
I see, so they were more symbolistic rather than practical.
By this time, yeah.
Okay, and what's this gun you've got down here?
This is actually an MP41. This is a German captured weapon.
So this would have been a captured German gun?
Yeah.
Okay, so did the Cossacks still use rifles, or were they?
They did. They were equipped exactly the same as any Red Army soldier, so full gun collections actually over there.
Yeah.
But bolt action rifles, SVTs, howitzers, cannons, tanks. Basically, it's just a dedicated regiment.
Okay, so they were as well armed as the rest of the Russian force.
When serving in the Red Army military, yeah.
Yeah, they weren't just like a nomad troop, left behind, an afterthought with hand-me-downs and cast-offs from the main army.
No. So the actual clans themselves may have used old traditional stuff as well, but when they were actually in the army, they were a proper dedicated regiment. Again, with the Imperial Russian Army, they were actually, some of the units were guards, so they were actually the bodyguard.
Okay, and going down to your sidearms here, I see you've got another MP40 on the back.
MP40.
So dual wielding, and what are these blades you've got here?
So that's the bayonet for the rifle.
Okay.
So technically a lot of cavalry in the Russian army would fight, or in the Soviet army would fight as dragoons.
Okay.
And then I've got my 1891 pattern dragoon sabre.
Okay. So again, with this sabre, would this have been used, or was this purely ceremonial?
So this would have been used. So Russian cavalry also carried their swords from sword.
Okay. So I suppose a sword is more suited to horseback than guns. And your bayonet, is that for which rifle would that be for?
That would be the Mosin Nagant rifle.
That is the Mosin Nagant. Okay, excellent. So how did you find that the cavalry divisions favoured in what was a mechanical war?
So it would be very dependent on the situation. Soviet cavalry actually increased in number during the war. They found that if you were in the woodlands or in the swamps, horses are much more mobile than tanks.
Okay.
But in open fields, against a prepared enemy, they tend to get shot down.
Okay, absolutely. 10 out of 10 for mobility, 0 out of 10 for armour. But would they have been used more as shock troops?
Broken through troops. So they'd often become cavalry mechanised corps. So you have a tank corps and a cavalry corps. Tanks will break through, cavalry get behind, and then they'll break deep behind enemy lines up to like 60 kilometres behind if needed.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for that. Very interesting. Thank you. So here we are with some more of the Russian guns, and let's have a quick look. So down here we've got what would be considered light machine guns.
Yes, so light is a pejorative term. It refers to the fact that these weapons are designed not to be used from heavy tripod platforms, which give you a lot more stability for ultra long range combat.
Yeah.
But to be used as infantry assault weapons. So
Okay.
the term light simply refers to not really the weight of it in comparison to other guns, but the ability for the average infantryman to actually pick it up and use it as a weapon on the battlefield while moving forward, as I'm doing here. The bipod rotates for this exact purpose. I would be walking forward, firing from the hip, not from the shoulder, because it's too heavy to do that accurately.
So it'd be more for suppression rather
Yes.
than accuracy.
The riflemen
Keep
have
the
taken
heads
up their
down.
positions.
Yeah.
I'm leapfrogging in front of the rifleman, giving myself cover, at which point, when I'm done, I would throw the weapon onto the ground, which I'm not going to do because it's an antique.
Very expensive. Absolutely.
And then I would take up position prone. Like so. And then I would be able to take accurate fire as the rifleman would then leapfrog past me, and we would consistently do that to take ground from the enemy.
Okay. So what's this gun to your right here?
This is a very interesting weapon. This is a BAR, the Browning Automatic Rifle.
Okay.
Now,
So the Americans.
maybe think of the Americans first. Now, John Moses Browning was a big proprietor of making his designs available to Europeans. So this specific one was actually made by FN. You might just be able to see there, in Belgium. John Browning had lots of friends in the FN factory.
Yeah.
As such, this is not in the American 30-06 round, but the European/German 7.92 round.
Okay.
It was really, his vision was to turn this into the standard assault weapon of Europe at the time. It saw limited success, however, due to the fact that it is really, the basic design setup is for an automatic rifle concept designed during the First World War, not a light machine gun.
No.
Hence, the magazine can only hold 20 rounds. It is, where it's located is fantastic for using as a weapon, but not as a light machine gun as such, trying to get under the weapon while it's got the bipod on.
Okay, so in the prone position.
The mechanism itself is open bolt. You have to remove the magazine because it doesn't close on empty magazines. You can see there the bolt stays open when it's ready to fire. When you pull the trigger, it slams closed. Now the downside for that is, of course, when you've got the gun ready to fire, it's open, allowing dirt and grime and such things to get into the magazine and the barrel.
And it doesn't have any dust shields like the... Oh, it does? Oh, excellent.
This one does, because the Belgians are very good at building guns, and just in case you think, but how are the rounds going to eject when if you get into combat all of a sudden? When you pull the trigger, it pushes itself out the way.
Excellent.
So even with all the nice little extra things the Belgians added, like for example a button which can allow you to remove a hot barrel, the ridges to ensure the barrels can last longer, the limited ammunition size, as well as the fact that it's really almost a bit too light to be a light machine gun, really put it in the issue of not being good enough for the sort of warfare that European armies were preparing for at the time. Despite that, it ends up in Polish service. We've seen them in Finland in limited numbers. We've seen them with the Swedish. Now they were neutral, but it shows the fact that they were used. And even in Greece with the sort of their defence of the Greek nation from the invading Italians. Hence why, as a Soviet reenactor, we've gotten hold of these. As the Germans were a part of many of those fields of conflict, they would have captured these, and the Germans were very, very well known for using captured enemy weapons. As such, we have simply captured it from them. There are pictures of these guns themselves being used as defensive weapons for the Leningrad and Moscow militia. Okay, excellent.
And do we have any small arms? Because you hear about the Tokarev T-33, is it?
We do have a T-33. I don't think I have it with us at the moment, unfortunately. However, I can show you a very interesting pistol nonetheless.
Excellent.
This is the Mauser C96. Specifically, this is the civilian concealed carry model. It has a slightly shorter barrel than your standard C96. These, during the First World War, this specific model, was smuggled into Tsarist Russia in tens of thousands, as the Germans correctly predicted that if a revolution could start, the Imperial Russians would pull out of the First World War and they could focus on the French and the British. So many of these pistols got into Russia that even today, Russians will refer to the C96 as the Bolo, and this specific one, around the world, with the short barrel, has been dubbed the Bolo C96.
Okay, so this wouldn't have been a World War II captured, or this would have already been in the Russian hands at the start of the war.
Yes, in fact, there was
pre-Barbarossa.
Absolutely. There is a famous bit of footage of the celebration of the victory over Germany in 1945 in Berlin. The stuff you'd imagine, it's men waving flags, cheering in the street. It cuts very briefly to a shot of a collection of Soviet officers firing their pistols into the air in celebration. Most of them are the semi-automatic Tokarevs, a couple of them are the old revolvers, one of them is a Luger, and one of them is still one of these. So even by 1945, the C96 was still seeing service amongst Soviet troops.
So was this the same as like the broom handle Mauser like we see in Star Wars? Absolutely. With Han Solo's pistol?
Yes, this is very famously and correctly put. Han Solo's blaster, redubbed the DL-44.
Yeah.
As a firearms expert, I can tell you what's real guns that they used for Star Wars. If you find a good plumber, you can probably ask him what specific bits of pipework they put onto it to turn it into a space blaster.
You know, the old MG42, we know was the Stormtrooper's blaster.
The Sterling submachine gun, yes.
That's it.
So yes, as such, it's became famous from movies, TV, and real life use. I'll leave you with a final little factoid that Winston Churchill himself, during his military service, had one of these and attested that it actually saved his life on multiple occasions.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you ever so much for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that was some of the Living History members from the Soviet front. You can find them on Facebook. And if you want to see more videos like this, like and subscribe and tell me in the comments. Bye for now.